Kia ora, my name is Ben Kenobi. I've been doing stuff for the game developers community since about 2011, 12. Various initiatives, meetups, conferences, and I've been on the New Zealand Game Developers Association board on and off for about 7 or 8 years, I think. It's like a third family to me. I come down to the Game Developers Conference every year and see what I feel is essentially cousins, and just catch up. Like I feel such an affinity with these people, and I have so much love for this community. Yeah, it's a challenge. I don't see any fundamental reason why something having some sort of extrinsic goal prohibits it from being fun in whatever way you define that word. But there always seems to be, when you're producing something, a pull in multiple directions. And if you're being pulled in one direction, whether it's to have some sort of culture and heritage outcome or some sort of curriculum-based outcome, it is very easy to lose sight of the types of behaviours and mechanics that create engagement. And so, it can work. It just often it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't really matter, and sometimes it does. So, I guess for the work that we do for Aotearoa, obviously paramount is that the stories are told authentically and genuinely. Often it's a marriage between the things that are required for your outcomes and the fun, but sometimes they're handled as separate tasks. You just need to make sure you check the boxes separately. So yes, this is really the crux of the company that I work for, which is Aotearoa. We have quite interesting relationships between our funders and our iwi partnerships, where often our funding is coming from a different source. So you have to build in a self-imposed sign-off pipeline that is not so much about the project that you're working on or the fund that you've been given, although it probably was a part of your application and probably part of why it had so much strength, but more a part of your company's ethos. Every few days that I interact with the game developers community, you see something, and oftentimes it's just a mistake or a comment, a misguided comment that if you approach the person, they'll see the error of their ways, and often they do when you do approach them. But it is hard to shake decades of stereotypes. And even people who you have a lot of respect for, you might catch, you know what, I've made mistakes myself, plenty. And as soon as you do them, you're like, that's just decades of using that language, which is no longer good enough for me and for the community. The New Zealand game developers community has taken a page out of some of the more progressive communities around the world, including the Melbourne game scene, which I remember going to Melbourne International Games Week. It was Rugby World Cup 2014. I went to the GCAT, Unite, that sort of thing, and seeing just how inclusive and how broad, varied, and open-minded it was. It was a real eye-opener, and I think Wellington's a great place for that to start. And I've been really impressed to see how it's grown since 2012. But I think there's still a ways to go. Yeah, I still see toxic behaviour in some of the games that I still play. World of Warcraft as an example. And so I've come to the point where I think with any new form of communication that humankind, stumbles upon, there's an element of us as a species getting good at using them. having children who are now playing games with me, and you have to not just turn things off, but also, and this is really something that I think about a lot when I think about bullying and misinformation and that sort of stuff, is equipping young people with the tools, the psychological, the emotional tools to navigate online spaces that have a potential for being exposed to toxicity. I mean, the last thing I can think of is I did a VR escape room with my family down in Topol, and my brother and I figured out that you could pick up the donuts on the table. There was like a Mad Hatter themed one, and eat them. Completely irrelevant to the game, but we must have spent about 5 minutes giggling, giggling like little children, stuffing donuts into each other's faces. And I think you can inject your own fun into any experience, regardless of what it is. When I think about the creation of narratives and using video games as a medium, to me, what I'm suspecting is the way forward is to do it communally, to listen more than we're talking, and to try and find common grounds that I suspect are also quite emotional common grounds, kind of a bit more kind of primal common grounds, to build worlds and characters and narratives out of, in order to kind of re-understand the human condition in 2022. Because some of the literal translations of some of the tools that we've gathered throughout the centuries are starting to become a little bit harder to apply, just simply because of language, and we've got really complex, fast-moving information flying around. We may need to come up with different proverbs and different, whakatauki to help us. It's not really about understanding. It's to help us navigate, right? It's to give us tools like navigators. It may seem a little bit short-sighted, but anything to do with AI still is a very interesting arena. Obviously, we see a lot of people posting up pictures from AI art generators and stuff like that, and I've had my go, and man, are they addictive. Yeah. You're trying to game them. Trying to find the right way to phrase things. And I think what's interesting about that stuff, that perhaps isn't something that's discussed a hell of a lot, is that those algorithms are the result of a specific world view, and so although they're seemingly primal, it's quite easy to believe that they are skewed in some way. But I'm quite interested in this idea of what are the cultural flavors of AI? What are why does it behave in the way it does? And if you give two AI tasks to two different sets of coders, potentially with different backgrounds, will you get two AI that think differently, and therefore they're not neutral? They come with cultural baggage, or maybe they come with its own new cultural baggage because it's kind of born out of just kind of like the pieces, as opposed to the culture of the person who's writing the pieces. So that to me is interesting from a perspective of culture and heritage. Even though I painted it, there's shapes and patterns and characters potentially that are sacred, and so there needs to be like a toolkit to filter that stuff out. I think nuance is really key. When you live in a world that is full of noise and it's full of clickbait and people trying to capitalize on your very limited attention span and free time, therefore you're going to lose a lot of the gray areas. The thing that gets me about nuance and kind of gray areas is not necessarily that they are, I think, a way to try to create a common ground or try to approach real truth. When you acknowledge the grey areas, you also have a much less extreme feeling towards whatever conclusion that you come to. Well, it's gradual. It's always incremental, isn't it? There's no one kind of key that we need to find to unlock the last seal. It's just as destructive to shut down or to ridicule or to to crack down on bad behavior as it is to be bad, as it is to behave badly in the first place. But I think one of the tools that we all need to keep in mind to try and cultivate is to say that person's hurting. Even if they're not, to start off with just that person's hurting. Let's start with that and let's build from there, as opposed to they're wrong, or even they're partly wrong. It's like, first of all, they've lashed out, and that may have come from a variety of things that you don't understand. And so to understand the context of that lashing out first, I think is really important. For me, story worlds is what I gravitate towards video games for. I love sitting down and just exploring a world and meeting its characters and stuff like that. I would love other types of, other aspects of games if I didn't have other stuff in my life that kind of satiated those desires. Puzzles. Puzzles. 15 years ago, I'll feel quite confident in saying that video games especially aren't considered to be a part of the social fabric. I don't see sport or board games as being much different from video games in many ways. I think the stigma of video games being this thing that kind of nerds do in the basement, it's starting to go away. I don't see them, I see them as being like painting a sculpture or a sport, or either playing or spectating. I really don't see it as being, I don't separate games from society. And so to me, game as a verb is just a part of life. And games are just sparks that help light that part of the fire, really.